Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. I wanted to do a topic on, I've always wanted to start doing something where it's like a conspiracy theory power hour because I feel like not only are conspiracy theories often dismissed when they should be, I'm not saying they should be believed, but I'm saying conspiracy theories should be at least listened to. Does that make sense? Because not all conspiracy theories turn out to be false. In fact, a lot of conspiracy theories turn out to be true. I would say if I had to estimate, if I had to guess, I'd say about 50-50. So that's still pretty big odds. 50-50, half of the time conspiracy theories turn out to be correct, right? And so that's why we shouldn't just automatically dismiss people because remember when Monica Lewinsky came out with her allegations about Bill Clinton, everyone originally called her crazy, and it turned out she was right. So it's always good for people to exercise their freedom of speech. It's good for people to use their critical thinking skills as well. And also, um, if someone's going to get to the bottom of this, obviously the FBI is incompetent, the CIA is incompetent, the FBI is incompetent, the CIA is incompetent. All of these major intelligence agencies, either they're corrupt or they're incompetent or they're not doing their job. But clearly, the whole Epstein case, they have completely mishandled the Epstein case completely. So it actually might take everyday people to solve this riddle, to solve this problem. So we should start something where people are free to come and discuss their true, honest opinions, how they really think, how they feel, what they believe, no judgment, and that's why I think a conspiracy theory power hour is a great idea. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't seen other YouTubers start doing it. They'll probably start doing it. You'll watch. They'll probably start doing their own conspiracy theory power hour on their channel. So, three things that we're talking about today and this conspiracy theory power hour, although everyone is welcome to talk about whatever they want, but especially I wanted to ask three questions. So, the first question was maybe Trump was involved. Um, I'm asking this question again for two reasons. First off, you're going to say, oh, obviously he is. But the reason I'm asking this question again is because this question was actually asked a few years ago. And when people asked this question a few years ago, guess what happened? They were called crazy, they were called conspiracy theorists, the MAGA people would scream at you. But now, this same question, when you ask people, oh, maybe Trump was involved, people will be like, oh, yeah, of course he's involved, right? But the answer 3 years ago, if you asked 3 years ago, was Trump involved in the Epstein list and the Epstein files? 3 years ago, people would call you, oh, you're crazy. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a liberal. You're a liberal Democrat. So obviously, you can see how a question 3 years ago, people would have said, oh, you're crazy. Now, people like, yeah, he's clearly involved. Trump's clearly involved way more than he acknowledged on in the Epstein list. Now, the second question that I have is JD Vance. He must be okay, so a few years ago, when Trump was running for re-election, Trump actually, this actually, no, it came out, yeah, it came out a few years ago because the first time around when Trump was president, the first time around, we had a different vice president. We had Mike Pence. Mike Pence, it almost sounds like pants, Mike Pence. But, anyways, we had a different vice president, Mike Pence. So, a few years ago, when JD Vance and Trump were running for re-election, JD Vance was grilled. He was grilled about Trump. He was caught off guard. He was caught with his pants down. He was caught, with his thumb in his ear. Like, there's all English expressions. They're English expressions to describe when someone is completely blindsided, caught off guard, caught with their pants down. So JD Vance was completely caught off guard, caught with his pants down. He was grilled about Trump because they were able. So Dana Bash, there's a famous interview with Dana Bash and JD Vance. And JD Vance apparently had his first initial opinion of Trump was that Trump was a scumbag. Because when JD Vance was and they have a recording of this, it was played on CNN. It was played by Dana Bash. Dana Bash when she interviewed JD Vance. They have a recording of JD Vance saying his true opinion about Trump. They asked JD Vance, "How do you really feel about Trump?" And you know what JD Vance initially said? He said he doesn't like Trump. He said, and in fact, he said more than he just didn't like Trump, but I will be nice. I will be nice and not go there. But if you want to go there, you can go to that Dana Bash interview where Dana Bash from CNN, she interviewed JD Vance and she said, "Why are you suddenly changing your tune? Just because he's offering to make you vice president, now you're changing your tune on Trump?" Isn't that kind of flip floppy? Isn't that kind of, oh, what a politician would do kind of stuff, you know? Why is he suddenly changing his. First he hates Trump, now he likes Trump? First he hates Trump, that's his real opinion. And then when Trump offers to make him vice president, suddenly he likes Trump. And so Dana Bash on the CNN interview, she was spot on. Dana Bash from CNN, she was spot on. She said, "Why are you suddenly now changing your opinion on Trump?" And now this is going to come into even more question because of this whole Epstein thing. So my question, and should be everyone's question, is was JD Vance complicit in the Epstein stuff? Why was JD Vance originally he hates Trump? Why would he hate Trump? And then suddenly after Trump says, "Oh, he's gonna make JD Vance his vice president," now JD Vance suddenly likes Trump. How does he go from such a big change of point of view? Was it merely the fact that he was bribed with the offer of being Trump's vice president? Or was there something else going on in the background with regards to the Epstein files? Because another valid question you have to ask is if Trump and Pam Bondi were in cover-up mode, right? If Trump and Pam Bondi were running for re-election, knowing that they were going to have to address the Epstein files, knowing that they were going to have to try to cover this up, right? If Pam Bondi and Trump were intentionally trying to cover up the Epstein files, then wouldn't Trump select a vice president who would help Trump cover everything up? It would be so much harder for Trump and Pam Bondi to get away with an Epstein file cover up when they have a vice president who's not on board, right? So isn't it a valid question to ask? Is JD Vance on board? Was JD Vance complicit? Right? Because if Trump, hypothetically, logically speaking, if Trump and Pam Bondi are intentionally knowing that they're going to do the second presidency, the second term, trying to cover up the Epstein files, well, wouldn't Trump then want to choose a vice president who would help them cover it up? Why would if Trump and Pam Bondi are desperately trying to cover up the Epstein files because Trump's involved, then why would Trump choose JD Vance as his VP? Did Trump choose JD Vance as his vice president because JD Vance was going to help Trump cover up the Epstein files? Or is there something else sinister going on here? But clearly it makes sense. It makes sense that if Trump was involved, that he would pick JD Vance to be his VP in order to cover up the Epstein files. So Trump and JD Vance, there's something going on there. We still don't know for sure because maybe what will have saved JD Vance is this interview between Dana Bash and JD Vance, where JD Vance initially said that he did not like Trump. But then after Trump offered to make JD Vance the vice president, then suddenly now he's on board with Trump. This is what's going to come back to save JD Vance. Because right now, JD Vance, if not for that interview, is looking very complicit in the Epstein files. JD Vance is looking extremely complicit in the Epstein file cover up. Because, obviously, if Trump and Pam Bondi are going into the second 4-year presidency with the intention to cover up the Epstein files, it would make sense, obviously, that Trump would want a vice president to help him cover up the Epstein files. So, did Trump pick JD Vance to help him cover up the Epstein files? Is that why Trump picked JD Vance to be his VP, to be his vice president? Did Trump pick JD Vance to be his vice president in order for Trump to help Trump cover up the Epstein files? Is that why he picked JD Vance? And JD Vance is looking very complicit right now because people are going to be like, yeah, why did he pick JD Vance? Was JD Vance supposed to help Trump? Was JD Vance supposed to help Donald Trump cover up the Epstein files and do a big cover up like with Pam Bondi? So, what's really going to come back to actually help, the one thing that will actually help JD Vance in this case is that interview that he did with CNN with Dana Bash, where Dana Bash shows a video clip of JD Vance from many years ago, originally saying JD Vance originally said he don't like Trump. He doesn't like Trump. But then suddenly, after Trump offers to make JD Vance his vice president, then suddenly JD Vance is on board with Trump. So if JD Vance were smart and if he were really good with public relations, right? What JD Vance might want to do is turn around and say, well, JD Vance had nothing to do with the Epstein files, and JD Vance originally didn't like Trump. So, of course, JD Vance didn't have nothing to do with the Epstein file cover up because JD Vance said from the beginning he didn't even like Trump. And maybe if JD Vance admits that the real reason that he offered to be Trump's vice president was merely so that he could have a job as the VP, that would be an honest, at least that would be an honest answer. It is not the most ethical. It's not the most ethical answer to say for someone to hate a president, but then suddenly be offered a VP position, a vice president position, and then be on board with the president. That's not the most ethical, but it's a better alternative to being complicit and covering up the Epstein files. So this is going to be a crucial moment for JD Vance in the next election. This is going to be a crucial moment. JD Vance has to decide, does he want to be looking like as if he helped Trump cover up the Epstein files? Or does JD Vance instead want to come out and say, okay, he hated Trump. He really did hate Trump. He always hated Trump. He had nothing to do with the Epstein files. And the only reason he decided to, be Trump's VP was because like it was his only chance to be VP, right? It being a vice president is not easy. It's not an easy position to get, right? It's not easy to be picked as VP. So if you have a president that comes around, even though he's not the greatest president, and he picks you to be VP, your chances to be vice president, it's very, So JD Vance, maybe what he needs to do is turn around and say, look, he's not complicit in the Epstein files. He's not helping. He wasn't picked to be Trump's vice president to help him cover up the Epstein stuff. The real reason JD Vance was picked by Trump was maybe because JD Vance would make a good vice president, but really had nothing to do with the Epstein files. And JD Vance should say, like when JD Vance is, JD Vance is explaining his position as to why he went from suddenly hating Trump to suddenly liking Trump, well, maybe JD Vance should just be honest and say he did it for his career. He wanted to be vice president. Even if it had to be vice president under Trump, at least JD Vance got to be vice president, and he wanted to be vice president. And then, not only at least JD Vance will come out looking a little bit honest, but then if JD Vance turns around and said, and not only did JD Vance want to be vice president badly, just to be vice president. But then JD Vance could also justify it and say he was going to help fix stuff from the inside, keep an eye on Trump. JD Vance was going to keep an eye on Trump. JD Vance was going to keep monitor Trump, maybe even get dirt on Trump. Maybe even JD Vance's strategy to be vice president under Trump was to try to expose stuff about Trump, right? And if JD Vance were smart, he would come out saying this because it doesn't make sense how we have Trump and Pam Bondi who are clearly covering stuff up with the Epstein case. Then, if that were the case, why would they pick JD Vance to be the VP? Did they pick JD Vance to be the VP to help Trump cover this stuff up? Or perhaps they picked JD Vance to be the VP because no one else wanted to be VP or would even consider being VP. And you had JD Vance, a person who was desperate to be vice president, even if it had to be under Trump. He was desperate to be vice president, right? Other people might have been flat out no. It's not worth it. Yeah, so what? Okay, so they're turning down the one of the biggest jobs in America. So that people have to decide between working for Trump or turning down the biggest job in America, being vice president. And JD Vance, he said he gotta do what he gotta do for his career. JD Vance was gonna do what he gotta do for his career. And even if it had to be that he had to be the vice president under Trump, a man he hated. And JD Vance flat out said, if you watch that interview between Dana Bash on CNN and JD Vance, they have a clip of JD Vance. Originally how he felt about Trump, he did not like Trump. JD Vance did not like Trump originally. They have a video of him saying it. So this is what actually may be the only thing that saves JD Vance, because other than that video, it would look as if JD Vance was complicit in all of this Epstein cover-up, right? Because you have to say, well, why would Trump and Pam Bondi pick JD Vance if they knew they were planning on doing a major Epstein cover-up? Did they pick JD Vance because JD Vance was going to help them cover it up? Obviously, if a president and Pam Bondi and Trump, they were going to do this big Epstein cover-up, then why would they pick JD Vance? Did they pick JD Vance knowing that JD Vance would help them cover up the Epstein stuff? Because that would then make JD Vance look complicit. However, thanks to this interview that JD Vance did, where he openly said his true opinion about Trump, which was his first opinion, this was what he first said, which that he did not like Trump, this could actually vindicate him from looking complicit in the Epstein files. Because now JD Vance can turn around and say, oh no, he's not part of the Epstein files. JD Vance is not part of the Epstein cover-up. JD Vance don't even like Trump. The only reason JD Vance agreed to work for Trump was because JD Vance had the opportunity to be the vice president of the United States of America. And those opportunities don't come around very often. So it's the choice between either not being vice president, the second biggest job in America, or having to work for Trump. So sometimes people might pick one of the lesser of the two evils. What is the lesser of two evils? JD Vance being vice president would be wonders for his career. Everyone wants to be vice president. And maybe JD Vance had to really make a tough decision. Should he, slightly compromise his ethics and work for a man he doesn't like, work for a president he doesn't like, work for Trump he doesn't like? Should he compromise his ethics and work for Trump, right? Or should he refuse the second biggest job in America to be vice president? Vice president, obviously next to president, under president, vice president is the biggest job, the biggest career opportunity in America to be vice president. And so JD Vance was put in a tough place. He was like put in a rock hard, what's that English expression? Put in a rock in a hard place. JD Vance was in a hard place, whatever. JD Vance was put in the middle of between a rock and a hard place because JD Vance had to choose between being vice president, which is like one of the most coveted positions aside from president. It's the second most coveted position. To be vice president of America is obviously a major career opportunity, but if he was going to be vice president, it means also he has to now work for Trump, who obviously Trump, he didn't like Trump. And he made that clear in his interview with Dana Bash that JD Vance did not like Trump. So we have to now ask ourselves two questions. And JD Vance has to be he needs to be smart about this. Or maybe really what America needs is America needs JD Vance just to be flat out honest. Please, JD Vance, just tell us the truth. And we have two questions, JD Vance. Were you complicit in the Epstein cover up? Is that why Trump picked you to be vice president? And if not, if you were not complicit in the Epstein cover up and you don't like Trump and you really don't like Trump, then why did you take the position of the vice president of America? Are you going to be honest and just say you did it because it was the biggest career opportunity that you've ever had? You know, obviously he might hate Trump and he really hates Trump's guts. Maybe JD Vance really knows that Trump's sick. Maybe JD Vance knows Trump's in the Epstein stuff and JD Vance hates Trump's guts for real because JD Vance is definitely not involved in any of that Epstein stuff. But JD Vance couldn't turn down the opportunity to be vice president of America. I mean, I think it's time JD Vance come out with the truth. Which is it? Were you complicit in the Epstein files? Is that why Trump picked you to help you cover up the Epstein stuff that Trump was involved in? Or JD Vance, are you not complicit in the Epstein files? And the reason you decide to work for Trump, even though you initially said you don't like him, and Dana Bash has the interview from years ago. That's why she grilled you, Dana Bash. That's why Dana Bash grilled JD Vance on her show on the when she did the interview prior to the election. Dana Bash interviewed JD Vance, and she flat out said, "Why would you suddenly change your whole like point of view about Trump? First you said you didn't like him. They pulled up the interview. JD Vance admitted he didn't like Trump. And then after Trump offers JD Vance to make him the VP, the vice president, then suddenly JD Vance is on board with Trump." And Dana Bash asked a very valid question as a reporter on that CNN interview. On that interview with CNN, Dana Bash asked JD Vance, "Why would you suddenly change your tune?" Right? And maybe it's time for JD Vance, because it's better than him, saying about the Epstein stuff, like it's saying he covered up the Epstein stuff. I mean, he should just tell the truth, whatever the truth is. Whatever the truth is, he should tell the truth. But hopefully, obviously it would look way worse for JD Vance if he comes out and says he was like in some way helping Trump cover up the Epstein stuff. Rather, if he just admits, okay, he didn't like Trump, it's clear, the evidence is there. He did not like Trump. He never liked Trump. He always thought Trump was disgusting. He always thought the Epstein stuff was disgusting. But the reason that he decided to still work for Trump was because he was offered to be vice president, which is the second biggest job in America. And this was the biggest career opportunity that JD Vance was going to get. So which is it, JD Vance? Are you complicit in the Epstein cover up? Or did you just decide to work for Trump because you were offered to be VP, which is the biggest coveted job in America, to be vice president of America? Which is it? JD Vance, election time's coming up. It's already been a few years, and well, about 1 year. Oh no, actually, it hasn't been that long. But anyway, still, 4 years is gonna come fast. 4 years, it's probably maybe it's even if it's been 6 months, a year, whatever. But still, 4 years is not a long time. 4 years is gonna come up, JD Vance, and you need to decide how are you gonna respond to this whole Epstein stuff? Are you gonna admit? Are you gonna say that like? Just tell the truth. First off, just tell the truth, whatever it is. Please don't do politics. Please don't lie. Okay, please just tell us the truth. Were you, JD Vance, were you complicit in the Epstein cover up? Or is the reason that you decided to become the VP for Trump was merely because the vice president is the biggest career opportunity you were offered? Because if not, then why would Trump pick you to be his VP? If Trump and Pam Bondi were in cover-up mode and were planning to cover up stuff about the Epstein files, why would they pick you as the VP? Did they pick JD Vance to help them cover up the Epstein stuff? Right? Why would they pick you, JD Vance, as VP? Why would they pick you, JD Vance, as VP? So JD Vance, you need to come out. You need to either admit that you were involved in the Epstein files, if that's the case. If whatever the truth is, if the truth is you were involved in the cover up of the Epstein files, then tell the truth. Or if you had nothing to do with the Epstein files, if you always hated Trump, and you're going to refer back to that interview where you initially said you didn't like Trump, then maybe you should admit that, you slightly maybe compromised your ethics a little bit, because, and be honest and say you slightly had to compromise your ethics. And, even though you didn't like Trump and you hated Trump, you still agreed to be the vice president under Trump, because the vice president was the biggest career opportunity you were ever offered, and you did it for your career. You did it for your career. I could get on board a little bit with that side there. Cause you know what? This man, it's hard to be in politics. It's hard to be in politics in the White House, etc. The vice president, the position of being vice president doesn't come along very often. It's like that Eminem song. It's like that Eminem song. This is your one shot, your one opportunity. And imagine someone is offered to be the vice president of the United States of America. Immediately, most people would say yes, right? To that coveted position, to be the vice president of America. But then now JD Vance has a really difficult decision, because he has to be vice president under Trump, someone who very well could be complicit in the Epstein files, someone who he doesn't even like, who JD Vance admitted in an interview he doesn't even like Trump. And that was the beginning. That was the very first interview with regards to how he feels about Trump. So, JD Vance, at least if you come out and say, okay, yeah, you never liked Trump, that's the truth. You had nothing to do with the Epstein cover up. The real reason that you still decided to be Trump's VP was not because you're going to help Trump cover up the Epstein stuff. The real reason you wanted to be the vice president under Trump was simply because it was your only ever uh, chance. It was your only ever chance. It was Vance's only ever chance to be the vice president of America. At least you're saying you did it for your career. You know, sure, it wasn't like the employer, your boss, Donald Trump. It wasn't your favorite boss, but at least you did something to advance your career. At least people could understand that. I mean, that would be more understandable and at least forgivable. That would be more forgivable to say that, you did, you still worked for Trump even though you hated him, simply to be the vice president of America. You did it for your career, because, it's hard to turn down the second biggest job offer to be the vice president of America. It would be hard for people to turn that job down. At least that's more forgivable than if suddenly we found out that JD Vance was complicit in the Epstein cover up. That would totally be like, if JD Vance, if we found out that you were complicit in the Epstein cover up with Trump and Pam Bondi, JD Vance, that would be a career breaker. Like, I don't know how, I cannot see how you would get elected in 2028 if it came out that JD Vance was complicit in helping Trump cover up the Epstein files. And that's the reason, if that's the real reason that Trump picked JD Vance to be his VP. So we got to find out the truth. Whatever the truth is, JD Vance, you need to tell the truth. You need to just come out with the truth, because the American people, we're tired of being lied to. We're tired of being lied to, and we just want the truth. So what is it? So, and then the third thing, which, by the way, and then let me now quickly go to comments, because I've been talking for a while. But I had to explain that. I had to explain that. Otherwise, people wouldn't understand. I had to explain it. Dennis, okay, Dennis Odell. First off, it was a mix of opinion and facts. I did say opinion, but I also said facts. And here were the facts that I said. I said Dana Bash did an interview with JD Vance. This is on YouTube. You could search it on YouTube. Dana Bash from CNN. Dana Bash from CNN did an interview with JD Vance where she says, suddenly now you want to be Trump's VP, vice president, But wait a minute, we have this interview with from we got from you from years ago that where you say that you don't like Trump. So why all of a sudden now you want to be Trump's VP after you said years ago you don't like Trump? So this is a fact. This interview with with JD Vance and Dana Bash and CNN is a fact. This video clip that exists of JD Vance from many years ago saying he don't even like Trump, that's a fact. And then JD Vance turned around and said, "Oh, well, he wanted to be VP for Trump." So that's a fact. Those were facts. And in my opinion, this is my opinion, is um, why would this is more of a question. It's more of a question actually. If Trump and not Dana Bash, sorry, if Trump and Pam Bondi, if Trump and Pam Bondi were going into this next presidency, the next 4 year presidency, with the intention to cover up the Epstein files, why would they pick JD Vance? Why would they pick him? Because you would think, right, that JD Vance, that you would think that Trump and Pam Bondi would be searching to pick a VP that would help them cover up the Epstein stuff, right? Why would Trump want to pick a VP who could potentially expose Trump when if Trump's agenda, if Trump and Pam Bondi's agenda is to cover up the Epstein files in the Epstein case, then why would they pick JD Vance to be the VP? Did they pick JD Vance to be the VP because they knew that JD Vance would help them cover up the Epstein stuff? Is that why they picked JD Vance to be the VP? So that's more of a question, really, and it's a valid question. Why did they pick JD Vance? If Trump and Pam Bondi were trying to cover up the Epstein stuff, then why would they pick JD Vance to be the VP? Did they pick JD Vance knowing that JD Vance would help them cover up the Epstein stuff, which would make JD Vance complicit in the Epstein cover up? Is that why they picked JD Vance to be the VP? Or maybe they picked JD Vance for a different reason. You know, JD Vance is younger, he's attractive, he's got a big following, you know, big everything. Maybe they picked JD Vance for a different reason. Who knows, right? So that's what we need to that's the question that we need answered. Because if JD Vance has any intention to run for president in 2028, we will need to know, hello, JD Vance, were you complicit in the Epstein cover up? And why did Trump pick you to be VP? And why did you still agree to work for Trump and be Trump's vice president, even though we have an interview? Dana Bash has an interview, it's on CNN, for years ago from you saying that you don't even like Trump. So you're going to be the VP for a president that you don't even like, right? But then, you know, like I said, if the real reason, if it had nothing to do, if JD Vance was not complicit in the Epstein cover-up, if JD Vance had nothing to do with that, and the real reason JD Vance still decided to be Trump's VP, Vice President of America, even though he don't like Trump, maybe he did it for his career. I mean, it's not often that people get offered to be the Vice President of America. Being offered to be the Vice President of America is one of the biggest coveted positions. And, you know, like that Eminem song, you know, you only get one shot, one opportunity in life. Sometimes you got to take it, right? And JD Vance, he had to be like, what's the lesser of two evils? You know, doing something great for his career, but then he has to work for Trump, that person he don't like, right? Or refusing the job and staying true to his ethics. But then if he refused the job to be vice president, he would be turning down the biggest job offer he'd ever got. He would be turning down the biggest career opportunity, the career opportunity to be vice president of America. If JD Vance turned that job down and turned that career opportunity down, he might have been really hurting himself, really, at the end, more, right? So it was a tough decision. And at least JD Vance, at least now he has the opportunity to come out and say, and maybe this interview with Dana Bash, where he admitted he never even liked Trump. This is what's going to save him, because right now JD Vance is looking very complicit in this whole Epstein cover-up. It is. That's the way it looks. Because why would Trump and Pam Bondi, if they knowingly were going to go into the next 4 years of presidency, knowing that they were going to try to cover up the Epstein files, why would they pick JD Vance? So maybe at least JD Vance, if he comes out and says, well, he never even liked Trump. No, he had nothing to do with the Epstein cover up. JD Vance had nothing to do with the Epstein cover up. He didn't even like Trump. And if he just is honest and says the real reason he still decided to be VP for Trump, be Trump's vice president, even though he don't like Trump, the real reason is simply because he didn't want to turn down the biggest job opportunity, the biggest career opportunity of his life, to be vice president of the United States of America. At least if he admits that, at least that's a bit of honesty that people can understand. Okay, people can understand maybe him thinking twice about turning down the biggest job in America to be vice president of America, which would be the biggest career opportunity that JD Vance ever had. So, okay, let's go back to the comments and see what else we got here. I like comments where people criticize me because I like to not debate, but I like to answer them and just say, no, this is where I was coming from. You know, if you have a question, if you disagree with me, if you don't like me, please say it because I like to it's not an argument. It's simply we're having a discussion, right? And if people just agree with me, then I can't have a discussion. It's like we can still obviously we can have a discussion if people agree with me. What I'm saying is that it would be a really boring discussion if people only agreed with me. Like if people only agreed with me, it would be a really boring discussion. So I like seeing when people have constructive feedback or any comments where they want to ask me a question or maybe disagree with me or even correct me because it's very possible that I could have mixed something up, right? It's very possible. So I'm from Canada. I'm Canadian, right? And don't worry, us Canadians, we're not meddling in your American elections like you guys accused the Russians of meddling in your American elections for years. We saw the news articles in Canada. Oh, the Americans are accusing Putin and Russia of meddling in American elections. Don't worry, Canadians, we're not meddling in your American elections. But this is a discussion about the world because if the most powerful man in the world, who is the president of the United States of America, is involved in gross Epstein stuff, I mean, human trafficking, that affects the whole world. That's a concern. That's a national security concern for Canada, for Russia, for Germany, for France. That is a national security issue for every country. So it is our business. It is Canada's business because we need to know, like, if we're doing business with Trump, who could very well be involved in all of this stuff, Canada needs to know this is an issue for Canada. Of course, if Canada is doing business with a corrupt man who's involved in all of this, that is a major security concern, a national security concern for Canada, and it is our business. So we're not just meddling in American elections, trying to, pick our favorite, which honestly, if you want to be honest right now, Canada, you know who Canada's favorite is? I've seen it. I've seen the commercials. I've seen the way they talk about her. I've seen the way they promote her. Canada's pick for president, who they want to be president, is AOC, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Canada wants her. The Canadian government, the Canadian Liberals, Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, and who's the other one? Anyways, the Canadian Liberals, the Canadian government, the French Canadians especially, you know who they want to be the next president of the United States of America? They want Democrat AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So right now, I actually prefer JD Vance over AOC. And I have reasons which I'll get into later. AOC is a whole other bag of worms. It's an expression. AOC is a whole other Pandora's box to open with AOC. So actually, I personally am going against what Canada's pick is. Canada's pick, the Canadian government's pick, really for who they want to be president in the next election. For because I guess AOC would be good for Canada. I guess if AOC was president of America, I guess if AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was the next president of the United States of America, I guess that would be great for Canada. Maybe it wouldn't be great for America. Maybe if AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was the next president of America, that would be not great for America, but apparently it would be great for Canada if AOC was the next president of the United States of America. So that's who Canada actually wants. But I see something in JD Vance. You know what I see in JD Vance? I see um I see something there. I see something honest about him because here's what I see honest about JD Vance is that years ago when Dana Bash brought up that interview. No, not years ago, months ago. Months ago, when Dana Bash brought up that interview clip, she had an interview clip where they asked JD Vance how he really feels about Trump. This was before he was offered to be Trump's VP. This was before he was involved with Trump. And JD Vance flat out said, I don't like him. I do not like him. No, no, no. JD Vance said he don't like Trump. You know what? Know something? JD Vance, not only did he say his honest opinion, but really saying he don't like Trump, knowing how rich and powerful Trump is, that actually shows character on JD Vance. Because if JD Vance was a real two-timing scumbag, JD Vance could have said he loves Trump. Because why would you say you hate Trump when you know Trump, how rich and powerful Trump is? Trump can have people disappear. Trump can have people disappear. So imagine JD Vance publicly saying he hates Trump when he very well knows how rich and powerful Trump is and that Trump could have people disappear, and JD Vance publicly saying he don't like Trump, he hates Trump. That's character. That goes to show to JD Vance's character. That shows to JD Vance's character there. So I'm actually on the side more. I would be leaning more towards JD Vance. However, most of Canada, pretty much all of Canada, the entire Canadian government, they want AOC for the next American election. They are like grooming her. Ugh, that sounds gross. But that's literally like what they're doing. Like Canada is like pulling up the red carpet for AOC. They're pretty much like, you know, yeah, Canada. Yeah, they are. Like it's you should see how they're gushing over AOC. You should see how the Canadian government and Canada they're like foaming at the mouth. They want AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be the next president of America so badly. So so actually someone said, "Oh, Vance is a muppet. Vance is a puppet." You want to know something? Yeah, I kind of do kind of think he's a puppet, but do I think he's involved in the Epstein stuff? No. He's definitely a puppet if like he says his honest opinion. He hates Trump. He don't like him. He thinks Trump's a scumbag. And then as soon as JD Vance is offered the VP position, suddenly now he's on board with Trump. Yeah, that's a puppet move. That's definitely a puppet move there. But do I believe honestly that JD Vance is involved in the Epstein stuff? No, I don't. And do I think that JD Vance was involved in the Epstein cover up? I don't. It's possible he could be. Like this is just what I think. This is my opinion. This is my opinion. I don't know for sure. Obviously, I don't know for sure. I'm not in JD Vance's White House area. I've never even met JD Vance. I don't know. I'm just going based off of the other voters or not voters. I'm not a voter. I'm from Canada. Well, I am a Canadian voter, but I don't vote in America. Anyways, what I'm saying is I'm just going based off of everyone else, like other people's opinions, right? Like I'm going based off of news articles. I'm going based off of YouTube clips. I'm trying to get a sense of the guy. I'm trying to look at the guy, look at JD Vance, and get a sense of his character. And my intuition tells me that yes, he might have done some shady stuff for his career. He might have compromised his ethics a little bit to because he didn't want to turn down the biggest job in America, which is to be vice president, which is the biggest career opportunity that someone can get. And you know, if JD Vance was a person who listened to that Eminem song, like that Eminem song played for so much in Canada. That Eminem song played 24/7 in Canada. One shot. You get one opportunity. You get one shot. Yeah, you know, this is your one shot. And like that was a famous Eminem song that played all over Canada. So if you constantly heard that Eminem song, this is your one shot. You only got one opportunity in life. This is your one shot. And JD's one shot to be vice president, like the biggest career opportunity he could get, came around. Even though he would have to work for someone he don't like, which is Trump, still like turning down, like it would be really hard to turn down the biggest career opportunity to be vice president of the United States of America. So what do I think? And I could be wrong. Like this is just my opinion. This is just how what I suspect. This is just what I my guess would be. This is just what I believe, what I think. But like I said, I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. I never claimed to know for sure. I'm not saying these are facts. I'm saying this is my opinion. This is what I think, but I'm not sure. And what I think is I don't. And my intuition about JD Vance is I don't think he's involved in the Epstein stuff. I don't think he's involved in the cover up of the Epstein stuff. I really do think that JD Vance don't like Trump. I really think he doesn't like him. He don't like him. He thinks Trump's dirty. He thinks Trump's in the Epstein stuff. I really think that JD Vance don't like Trump. And when you watch that interview that JD Vance gave, that looked genuine. That looked like a genuine, honest opinion. Because also, JD Vance, like he actually, when he said he didn't like Trump, that was actually could be damaging to his career because, Trump's rich and powerful. Trump can make people disappear. And now JD Vance, an upcoming politician, said openly says he don't like Trump. That could have been extremely like scary for JD Vance. And that goes to show JD Vance's character that he still said he don't like Trump. He said his honest opinion, even though he knows that it's kind of dangerous to say you don't like Trump because Trump could have make people disappear, right? So yes, I think JD Vance is sort of a little bit of a puppet. Yes, unfortunately though, they're all puppets really. I mean, they all got to do stuff that compromises their ethics. Like all of the politicians in America, they all do stuff that's really shady and unethical, They all do sometimes really screwed up stuff. And they get away with it, and the American politicians get away with it. They go away with doing a lot of screwed up stuff, unfortunately. So someone said Canada forgot about the COVID lockdown. No, we did not. Well, at least the conservative Canadians did not. I like your comment. I'm going to pin it, Buzz. Thank you, Buzz, for that comment. I'm going to pin your comment. Canada did not forget about COVID. In fact, every conservative Canadian is pissed off still from COVID because the liberal Canadians, they knowingly screwed over the conservatives. They knowingly screwed over the Canadian economy. The COVID stuff, the COVID lockdowns, it destroyed Canadians' businesses. People lost their homes. Hardworking conservative Canadians lost their homes, lost their businesses because of the COVID lockdowns. So this is what caused a major like dispute, a major animosity, a major hatred between Canadian liberals and Canadian conservatives. And I'm a Canadian conservative. I'm a conservative Canadian. I do not support Justin Trudeau. I don't agree with all the liberal stuff. Like the liberals, they have like transvestite school teachers. They have transvestites as school teachers. Liberals, and you probably saw the pictures of Justin Trudeau taking pictures with transvestites at transvestite school teachers. So the liberals, they overly tax everyone. The liberals, they overly tax everyone. They have made life hard for hardworking Canadians. The liberals, the creepy, weirdo liberals who are definitely probably the Canadian liberals like Justin Trudeau is definitely probably on the Epstein list as well. And the creepy liberal Canadians, the weirdos, the transvestite school teachers that like to be transvestite school teachers in Canada, all of those liberals, all of those crazy liberals, I don't agree with those crazy liberals at all. I'm a conservative Canadian and I am all about protecting the Canadian economy and also about human rights and decency, human rights, ethics, protecting the Canadian economy. And uh, Canada and the United States, we need to work together because we got some enemies that are coming for us. And you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say the name. It's a country. It's a country That a lot of people talk about. I'm not gonna say which country. I think you can guess which. It starts with a C. It starts with a C. I'm not gonna say the country because then if I say the country, people are gonna, So I'm not gonna say the country, but I've said the country before in other contexts where I wasn't so like openly accuse them of being an enemy. But this country is definitely an enemy of Canada, definitely an enemy of the United States. Starts with a C. I'm not going to say the name of the country so people can't suddenly turn around and start saying, oh, but this country is definitely an enemy of Canada, and that country's name is Canada. No, I'm just joking. No, actually, no. Canada is also an enemy of the country, but there is also another country that also starts with a C. Canada starts with a C, but there's also another country that also starts with a C. And this country, constantly people are saying, oh, we know that this country has the worst human rights record in the world, but we still work with them because of their economy. What? You are gonna still work with a country? You openly admit that this country has the worst history and record on human rights, but you're still gonna work with them because of their economy and what they build, bring, like, because of their strong economy? So no, I don't. This country is a serious threat to Canada, serious threat to uh, I'm almost gonna say they're a serious threat to Russia. They're not a serious threat to Russia. They're allies of Russia. This country that starts with a C, allies of Russia, extremely dangerous to Canada, extremely dangerous to the United States of America. And so Canada and the United States of America, we need to work together because this enemy is powerful, and this enemy. They want your jobs. They want to steal your American dream. They want to steal your American houses. They want to steal your American cars. They want to put money all in their pockets, and then they want to take money from your pockets and put it in their pockets. These people from this country that starts with a C, they want to take money from your American pockets and put it in their pockets. They want to steal your American dream. They want to take your American houses, take your American cars. And so Canada and the United States, we are seriously like we got to work together to figure out how to solve this problem.